Real estate investing has become such a craze online in the last 5 years, and I'm so over it. End quote. I'm quoting today's guest, Dominique Chenard, who is a real estate investor with a couple of small multifamily properties in Thunder Bay, Ontario, where she lives. And she happens to also be a practicing certified financial planner and a chartered professional accountant. Hello and welcome to the Truth About Real Estate Investing show for Canadians. My name is Erwin, Szeto. In case you're new to this show, this is one of the top podcasts in the space, including being recently ranked number 81 in the business category in all of iTunes across the world. Dominique is a successful real estate investor who believes real estate is an effective means to build wealth. So why is she over the craze? I don't blame her. I'm seeing many questionable education organizations pushing real estate investing using questionable methodologies and unqualified coaches. There was one influencer attempting to hype him and his coach up as they were driving around together in a car around Ottawa, and they made some disparaging comments about a property that they were offering on, saying it was a slum and they needed a whole bunch of work. Funny enough, the owner of the building saw the video and commented on the post. They also shared that the property was not listed for sale and they had received no offer. The poster backtracked privately. I've seen the screen captures. They apologized and admitted the video was created to build their influence, create hype on social media. So how embarrassing is that? Such as the truth about real estate investing, there are many fakers out there and they continue to post on social media. Speaking of fakers, another private mortgage company is in receivership. There is $58 million in money missing. There were promises of high returns. The accuser is being accused of spending lavishly on private jets and supercars and owning several luxury condos all over the world. If you Google Greg Martel and My Mortgage Auction Corp, you will find the news. I've posted the link to the CBC in the show notes. Really bad news for the investors involved, and yet another reminder how important it is to do quality due diligence. It's always required. Never go all in on one investment. Experience matters. Diversification keeps one out of trouble. Speaking of experience, for example, Cherry and I made a investment in a development project using some of our registered funds, and the builder has 40 years experience, over 40,000 houses and condos. They are one of the biggest builders in Ontario. So when someone has that kind of track record, that gives me a lot of confidence versus a newer MIC project that happens to have $58 million missing. Very popular question out there is being a landlord hard? Yes and no. I'll just say yes to keep it simple. In my experience, it's not nearly as hard as compared to all the other options out there, including having a job, building a business. There is no easy money out there, and direct ownership of real estate is the most efficient strategy to becoming wealthy. I know because my team members and myself, we've all done it. Over 45 of our clients have done it, as in making $1 million or more intentionally on income properties. Landlording is honestly much easier if you treat it like a well-run business, and unfortunately the majority do not. The majority are often the source of those nightmare stories. If my team and I can help you on your investment journey, simply just reach out to us on iwin@infinitywealth.ca. My team and I would be happy to hop on a Zoom to help guide you, point you in the right direction. If you like to book a call directly with me, understand my availability is not the greatest. I think I have maybe 2 appointment slots for all of May, and it's May 12th when I'm recording this, but reach out. I might have some more availability in June. Of course, there will be some homework involved. iwin@infinitywealth.ca. Again, that's iwin, IWIN, @infinitywealth.ca. On a personal sad note, a good friend of mine shared with me that his daughter has an eating disorder, which is just terrible to hear. His wife, the mom, had to drop down and work from full-time to part-time to supervise meals, which can take up to 2 hours to oversee that the daughter finishes all her food. I checked ChatGPT, and it tells me that nearly 1 in 5 teenagers may have similar symptoms of eating disorders. My friend's daughter also competes in a sport. Her her passion and her sport that takes up 5-6 days of her week. It's unfortunately one of those sports that where a certain look and body type is considered ideal. When I told Cherry about our friend's daughter, I explained to her that I've had the same concern for years. Hence, I vetoed our daughter's interest in participating in that same sport a couple of years ago, even though I had to go against both my daughter, my wife, and my mom. Instead, I've chosen activities that produce the greatest physical skills, plus throwing some self-defense. Hence, my daughter does CrossFit, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, gymnastics, and track. We've asked her to choose a team sport as well, because we believe there's lots to be learned from team sports, both being a good team member and being a leader. I specifically chose CrossFit because in our gym, understand that our gym's a little bit different than most. It's a lot more chill, especially a lot more chill than what people think is a CrossFit gym. And folks who go to our gym, and also there are folks who are very serious. There's quite a few varsity athletes that attend our and like AAA athletes that go to our gym. But for the old folks like myself, it's pretty chill. And for the more serious folks that are there, they're always eating or drinking protein shakes in the gym, including the ladies. They treat food as fuel for the engine, and they are the engine, of course, and not something that should be deprived of in order to be skinny, including the ladies. And several of those ladies run circles around me in the gym. My point is that I make decisions today based on what I see happening, risks I see happening 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the road. And that is why we bought each of our kid already investment properties, before they turn the age of 1. One kid has a duplex, the other kid has a student rental. We're also adding to our whole life insurance policy to pay for our massive tax bill from when we pass. And also that's why we make business decisions today in our businesses that push us out of our comfort zone. You'll hear more about it eventually, this other business that we're looking at acquiring when it's done. Because we're looking for a brighter future. But also we want our clientele and our businesses to align with our core values, which include helping people and creating, on the real estate side, creating rental housing supply. All right. My point is that we all know what the future problems are coming, like eating disorders, more concerned for my daughter than my son, and how today's young people can't afford houses, thanks to governments all over the world printing money. Whatever you invest in today, whether it's a gym or buying an investment property, both are hard, but time will pass, and those who put the hard work in today will get ahead in life. On to this week's show. And our guest is tired of real estate, tired of the real estate investing craze. At least the craze has died down significantly during the downturn. Several education companies are gone. Some coaches have gone quiet. Some of them have gone bankrupt. Such as the real estate cycle. Weak hands get flushed. We have Dominique Chenard, owner of Chenard Wealth, who provides managed investments, financial planning, insurance, group benefits, and accounting services. She is CFO to her rental property business. Her husband serves as the COO. He's the guy that's on the tools, and they have a plan to stop growing their portfolio at 5 properties. Even though Dominique attended a weekend course years ago and hired a coach for over 2 years, well, I'll let her explain. I don't want to spoil it, but she'll explain why she does not follow the hype of aggressive growth and wants balance in her life, running her own business, plus all the non-real estate investment stuff that she does. She's also young, I think we talked about starting a family. She's still young, of course. Plus, we chat about why she hired an accountant, even though she is one, and how she's fighting inflation both in her work and her portfolio. Please enjoy this show. Oh yeah, and it's always a treat. To me, it's always a treat to have someone from the financial planning world on this show. So please enjoy the show. Hi, Dominique. What's keeping you busy these days?
Tax returns, a lot of them.
How much of your business is accounting?
I'd say it's mostly March and April of every year. Like we do taxes very seasonally. So in March and April, it takes up like maybe 80% of my workday. But the rest of the year, we do everything else. So we focus on the investments and the insurance for the rest of the year. So maybe revenue wise, like 15, 20%
Mm-hmm.
is accounting stuff.
You wear many hats.
Yeah, I like to think I wear three hats. I don't want to wear too many more hats. And that's part of why I'm not as actively involved in our real estate holdings anymore, is because it was a lot of hats.
I'd probably
Yeah,
argue you wear more hats, but okay. For the listeners' benefit, let's go through the hats that you wear.
sure. So I own my own business, Chenard Wealth. So that's where I offer those three hat services I mentioned. So we manage investments. So I'm mutual fund licensed. We sell insurance like life insurance, disability insurance. We manage group benefit plans for employers, and then we do tax returns or other related accounting services. So that's in my business. Separately from that, we have 4 rental properties that we own personally with me and my husband. So I'm not involved in the operations of them so much, but I think just by being married by default, we still talk about the
Mm-hmm.
properties a lot.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I tend to be more involved when it comes time to like mortgage renewals and those kinds of things, tax time, obviously.
Right, right. So it sounds like your function is very much like the CFO.
Yeah, I'd say. Yeah. And the wife of the COO slash guy that does everything.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah. So, how many? So you have several designations as well.
Yeah, so I'm a CPA, so that's the path I originally took. I went into accounting, worked at an accounting firm, um, and then got into financial planning that way. And I'm a certified financial planner, so that's the commonly known financial planning designation.
So I think you're only the second or third CFP we've had on the show.
Oh,
Yeah.
nice.
Yeah. No one listens anyway. It's not a big deal.
Your 7 listeners, or is it 13 now? Are you at 13 now?
It depends if people share the podcast with their mom when they're on. So yeah.
Right, or if they play it in the background and they're doing something else.
Exactly. Uh, so my point is that not many financial planners hold actual real estate.
Yeah.
Some will do some REITs or whatever other investment, a passive investment vehicle for real estate. But you're rare, are you not? Is that your experience
I
when you
would
talk to other
say,
CFPs?
yeah, like I would say in our profession, like holding a property and especially doing those strategies like, refinancing, what we call a BRRRR in the real estate world, that's considered pretty risky. If you talk to a certified financial planner or someone that
Mm-hmm.
studies that area, like that's
Mm-hmm.
considered a high risk strategy. But if you talk to a real estate investor, that's considered low risk because it's real estate, right? It's like, well, buying real estate is low risk.
Mm-hmm.
So what I find funny in bouncing around those two different worlds is the difference in definitions of risk.
Mm-hmm.
Because you go to buy a duplex or even a single family, and you could argue
Mm-hmm.
we all know there's a limited supply of real estate and that
Mm-hmm.
there's always going to be a need for people to live somewhere. So from that standpoint, you could argue that's low risk. But it's just the fact of having a lot of your wealth in one thing. You have less
Mm-hmm.
diversification, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that these values are not promised, right? Like when we aim for an ARV when doing a project, like that's based on a professional opinion, but you don't know what your contractor is going to bill you is not necessarily what they agreed to on the estimate.
Mm-hmm.
What breaks that year is not promised. So there's a lot of aspects that I think everyday people would consider risky.
Mm-hmm.
But when you talk to a real estate investor, they're like, no, it's the lowest risk investment possible. And
Mm-hmm.
it's interesting, right?
Yeah, especially coming from your world.
Yeah.
Especially if you network with a lot of financial planners.
Yeah.
Did
Like
you
I
ever work?
consider from
Sorry.
an objective lens, like I consider the holdings we have to be like kind of medium high risk, like what we've been doing, right? And we've only ever done one project at a time. I know some people that do multiple construction projects, and that's crazy, right?
Yeah.
But once we experienced that 3.5% rate hike last year,
Mm-hmm.
right, we were faced with the reality like, wow, if we had more going on, if we had more projects we took on,
Mm-hmm.
we could have been in serious trouble, right? And so we grew our holdings like fairly slowly, I guess, based on the hype that was going on at the time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But we're just, I say we, maybe I should just speak for myself. I'll let Richard tell his piece. But I think I'm just really glad that we took it slow and kind of took our own tolerance for risk into the picture instead of just listening to the hype and what other people were saying. Like, oh, take what you're doing and just do double that because hashtag fast growth, you know?
Where
You know what I'm
did you
saying?
see that? Because I've been at this for
My
a really
news
long
feed was
time.
just disgusting for a while. Like
Oh,
I
okay.
I constantly do a purge, you know, I'm just deleting people or there's this newest real estate group now. Is it, I don't know the name. I don't want to guess. But there's a newer one and they started adding me on Facebook and, you know, posting like, "Oh, we do this, we do that." And have your investments been down last year? Buy real estate instead. And I'm like, ew, you know, so I keep deleting people. But yeah, the internet can be a pretty unsettling place, you know? Like it's just really easy for people to type something and post it
Hmm.
and not really realize the consequences of what they're saying.
Yeah, it's really difficult to fact check. It's actually hilarious when people get called out. I remember seeing on social media giveth and taketh away. I remember someone posted that they took a selfie outside an apartment building and said they had it tied up. And
Mhm.
then the actual owner commented, like, "That's my building. I had no idea it's for sale."
Ooh.
Right? And then he shared the DMs afterwards. The person the original poster apologized, saying they're just trying to hype themselves. So yeah,
Ouch.
yeah, social media is not real, you know.
It's not. And honestly, like people that I thought were incredibly successful and you know, people that I thought would have had millions in equity by a certain point all of a sudden disappear, right?
Uh-huh.
And then you hear that they've gone insolvent or that they've had to liquidate. And it's like, it really puts things in perspective, right? In your
Hmm.
mind, you're seeing them post and do all these things. And so
Hmm.
you have a picture of how they are
Hmm.
financially or otherwise.
Hmm.
And then you hear like that wasn't at all the reality or all this equity was fake, right? It was just
Hmm.
this kind of, you know, based on these inflated values. And
Hmm.
it's just shocking. I think people underestimate how many properties or overestimate how many properties you need just to be financially secure or financially comfortable in the future,
Hmm.
right? Like, you know, and I think the reason I think I look at it differently is based on, again, being a CFP and doing financial projections for a living. Like if I build a financial plan for somebody, right, you punch in their property,
Hmm.
estimating it goes up in value 2% a year, looking at the pay down of the mortgage, looking at the other assets, paying off your personal mortgage, eventually selling those, turning it into an income. Just a regular family having one or two or three rental properties can be extremely well off
Hmm.
in retirement.
Hmm.
And not everybody needs to retire early because if you just have a job you love, that's your way of contributing into society, you know? Like I think retiring early became this other internet craze that people had. Like once you reach certain goals, it's like, what else should be your goal? So people kind of felt the need to make retiring early their goal because it's just like a goalpost that you can
Hmm.
move up, you know? And it's strange. Like you asked me when I want to retire. My dad asked me that the other day. He's like, "Do you want to retire? You're probably going to retire at 40." And I said, "I'm retiring at 65." He goes, "What?" I'm like, "Well, why would I why would I want to retire at 40? What do you want me to do? You know, I'm just going to sit at home and, you know, watch
Hmm.
Netflix and
Hmm.
go take my dog for a walk at 1 p.m. and go for a nap at 3 and
See, but I think you part of it is that you understand that like the return, especially the cash flow, is not nearly sufficient in this market that we're facing. Even if you wanted to, it'd be really difficult to generate enough cash flow
yeah,
in
but
a
I
short
think
amount of
if
time.
you liquidate your portfolio, you kind of could, right? Like say you've got 5 properties and you kind of sell one at a time and live off of that income. You could do a combination of that, but definitely not on cash
Right.
flow from rental income. I think people learned that the hard way. You know, as soon as the interest rates went up a couple percent, they're like, yeah, never mind.
Hmm.
So thankfully, we have cash flowing properties even still in today's market, but our cash flow from we got 3 rentals that are fully rented out, one that's ongoing in construction, but it's just enough to top up our income a bit and to pay the taxes that we have to pay on our rental income. So
Can you
we're
tell me a
not,
bit
you
about
know,
your? Can you tell me a bit about your investment strategy? You have three rentals that are fully tenanted. What kind of property are they?
yeah. So our first one we bought in, I think, 2015. That was a duplex. So we lived upstairs, rented out the basement, kind of classic starting point for people. So we renovated the basement into a 1-bedroom apartment. We rented it out pretty much right away. And then we moved out of there 3 years later into our second property, in which we did the same thing. So we lived upstairs, rented out the basement. So that takes us to what year? 2019. Yeah, is when we bought our second property. So at that point, we had 1, 2, 3, 4 units, because 2 of them were in our basement. It was actually a huge house. There's 2 different units in the basement. And then after that, what did we do? We refinanced our first property at some point, so that was great. Then we bought our third rental in August of 2021. I think I'm getting my timelines right. No, in August of 2020. Thank you. And that was a 3-unit building. Sorry?
Was that pretty tasty timing?
Yeah, I guess. Yeah. It was a vacant triplex for $80,000 that had been vacant for a very long time.
What happened?
And so that kept Richard really busy throughout COVID. So, basically revamping the entire thing, creating 3 units. And then that one we did a refinance. So that was a classic burr, I guess. That was on Cameron Street. And then then we bought. Sorry?
All in Thunder Bay?
Yeah, all in Thunder Bay.
Yeah.
Then we bought our primary residence in November, so 3 months ago. And so we moved out of our rental and then rented out that unit. So that helped to offset the cost to our new place. And then last but not least, Richard just bought I think 3-unit building, which he's currently renovating. So he closed on that like 2 months ago now. So in February. And that one, I haven't even seen the spreadsheet on it. So I've been very, very removed from that one. But I'm trusting him with the operations, and he knows what he's doing by now.
So to me, this doesn't sound very risky.
No, and so if you talk to anybody in real estate, they would say like this is not risky, right? Especially we're doing one at a time. We have plenty of capital reserves. Like we've got by now, like we've got lots of home equity line of credits, unsecured line of credits that we have access to.
Yeah.
So we're able to basically use our own capital for renovations, which is super nice.
And your husband's in renovations, sorry. Yeah. What is Richard? It's Richard, right?
Yeah. So he was a painter, and is a painter professionally for years, and so he's he doesn't necessarily do a lot of the other trades, but he's very familiar with them. He knows how to interact with contractors, which I think is a huge part of being a real estate investor, right? Is knowing the basics of all the trades, and then knowing how to interact with people and how to know which part's your job, which part's their job, what to reasonably expect,
right?
How to monitor the job site.
And you already had contacts then as well, and you already know who was good at their job.
Correct. Yeah.
You probably already know who was on top, who would be on budget and on time.
Exactly, and he knows like what's a reasonable quote and what isn't, right? More than most. So I always said, like, if Richard left or if he died or something, I would not own these rental properties. And, it's very much a team effort. And it's something that I think if you don't have experience in the trades, you have to be very careful, right? It's kind of like going into a mechanic and having no idea. And, the mechanic could easily take advantage of you.
There's a reason that when I show up to see my tenants, I show up in my minivan. I don't show up in the other car. What I mean? Same thing with a pro tip for the listener. If you invest in Thunder Bay or anywhere outside Toronto, you show up and you look like Toronto, or when you call and you have a 416 number, automatically they think something else. They think they have impressions of you, which aren't usually favorable for your pricing.
Exactly.
So where's the risk in this?
Well, the risk is the leverage, right? The risk is that...
What? Are you 100% financed? Like what?
Well, the risk is that your payments on your mortgage and on your debt are higher than what you're bringing in. So you have to make up that difference elsewhere, right? And I think we all know people that right now they're paying more towards their properties than what they're making. So they have to go, and thankfully a lot of these people make good money at their jobs. So they're able to make just minor lifestyle sacrifices to make it happen. But if you find yourself at that extreme where, say, you need $8,000 a month just to keep your properties going and you can't find it, you got to make quick decisions, right? If you have to sell a property quickly, you know that you won't get what you want for it. Whenever you have to sell a property quickly, you have to take a cut on that amount and pay a lot of selling fees, breaking mortgages, mortgage penalties, right? There's a lot of costs to not having your house in order that come in. And I think that's risky. I really do. Like when you run out of cash and you don't have cash, and we've seen that, we've seen people, kind of put up in their stories like, hey, I need cash, need a loan, need an unsecured loan. Once you're at that last straw, sometimes the only solution is insolvency. And being anywhere close to that would spook me a lot,
So I got to read some lines from your Facebook post that got some attention.
Sure.
69 comments. I don't know if you call it viral, but a lot of people in our community commented on it.
Attention.
The toxic positivity while avoiding any mention of frequent insolvencies and losses. Quote unquote, it's all been about your mindset. Oh boy. And constant more. It's just getting exhausting. I can't seem to find a way to purge it from my feed, no matter how hard I try.
I found a way, by the way. Since then, I found a way.
And?
Yeah, I just started unfollowing like constantly. I alternate between unfollow and unfriend. Like if I can see who it is, I know them, but they're annoying, then I unfollow. But if I see who it is and I can't place them from a hole in the wall, like I don't know who it is, unfriend. And I just had to do that for like 2 months. And eventually my newsfeed had better things on it. Takes time. Takes a long time. It's from years, like I think in 2020 is when it really picked up, and I started whenever I get a friend request and it was someone with 46 mutual friends and their profile didn't have any red flags, I accepted it, right? But then it became hundreds of people, over time. And now I'm like, why did I accept all these people? And they're all just trying to pitch their real estate something or get some investors or.
Yeah, because I can tell because I have some friends and they'll take a course. They take a course, and then their social media profile output just goes nuts in terms of how often they post and what they post, and they change their look. They change their hair.
All of a sudden, they're very polished and they're very investment savvy,
Storytelling.
Yeah, they took a storytelling copywriting course on the weekend too. And there they are telling stories about how they made it from the bottom and now they're here, Yeah.
They have 2 properties, so now they're here. They've arrived.
Yeah, and they can teach you for only $2,000 a month.
And you speak from experience. You've attended some of these programs.
Yeah. So again, without names, we've been to like one weekend event at some point during COVID, actually, and then we've been part of a coaching program for 2 years. So I was in there in the first year. It was like a joint thing, and then Richard did a second year. But what else? I don't think I've taken any other like weekend things. Again, I was never big on doing, the too much information thing. I think we all know, like, once you can only receive so much information on investing, like eventually you just got to invest, right? Just do the investing. And lately, I don't know what's happened lately, but there's a lot of those weekend conferences. Have you noticed that? Like, it seems like every weekend there's 2 or 3 real estate conferences happening.
Yeah, the greed is still high in my opinion, even though the fear. Yeah.
And I wonder, to an extent, I think that's one of the hidden costs of real estate investing. Is like, do these people count their time that they're investing and attending these events and networking? All those hours, you could be building a business. Just saying.
No one needs to attend them all.
No, but I see people like attending a lot of them, and sometimes I wonder, like, are they actually investing? I don't know. Like, I think a lot of them are, or sometimes people are attending them as a coach or as a mentor. That's a little bit different. But
or that they're raising capital. They show up to my events as well.
Yeah, I don't know. I think time is the real wealth, is like having time, having control over your time.
Yeah.
And when you're spending so many hours a week on quote unquote investing, like investing is supposed to be something you do without needing your time. right? It's something you do and then you put your hands up
Mm-hmm.
and then you collect dividends. That's what investing is.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why I think it's a really unfair comparison when people compare, building a real estate business to putting money in a mutual fund. Like it's complete apples and oranges. It's not at all the same thing, right? Like I know some people that work in a sales role, like say they're working a commission-based job and they invest in RSPs or TFSA or what have you. And if they took away their time from making sales revenue, right, making commissions to go and build a real estate portfolio, they would make less money, right? They make less money from their commissions. And then they'd be divvying up their attention between these two things. And that's what I think nobody's factoring in. I don't know. That's the feeling that I get. I decided for myself, I was like, well, am I going to keep splitting my attention 50-50 between real estate and my business? Or should I go all in on my business? Because you can only wear so many hats, as you mentioned, right? And, we're not even parents yet. I realize at some point in the future, I'll have a third hat that I'll be wearing. And that's a lot of hats. So you kind of have to decide, like, do I want to be a generalist that I do 17 different things and make a little bit of money at each one? Or do I want to be just really good at one or two things and get some of my free time back? So I remember at some point, like my Sundays were all dedicated to bookkeeping for our rentals and my business, to planning out the week ahead when it came to the rental properties, to doing our cash flow updates, to doing, all this tracking and doing all this planning for our construction projects that we had going on, and updating, where are we at so far in the budget? And I was like, is this going to be my Sundays for the rest of my life? Is there another way that we can do this? So now, like, I even decided I don't do our accounting anymore. We brought on an external accountant, and especially because we're both incorporated now in our businesses, so there's kind of a lot going on. So I decided, you know what, like I rather have a third party advise us on this and be more like in the business owner seat versus the accountant seat. And I'm learning a lot from that.
Oh, okay. What are you learning? What are you learning from having an external accountant? Second set of eyes.
I'm learning the corporate side a little bit more. So we've always been working with self-employed people a lot, right? People that are not incorporated. And now I'm getting to apply a bit more of those like technical concepts that I've learned in school or that I've learned through my CPA program, but that I haven't seen that much in detail in real life. So I'm learning a lot from that, and as we know, a lot of questions people have is, should I buy properties in my corporation or not? So doing a lot of that analysis for ourselves has been very interesting.
And then what have you decided for yourselves? Are you going to invest in the
for ourselves? I mean, that's maybe another topic, but we decided that we're probably going to put a stop at 5 properties, to be honest.
What do you mean stop? As not buying another one, or what do you mean?
Exactly. Like if we buy another one, we sell one and, buy a different one, but we're going to keep 5 properties. And so with that in mind, being that they're already purchased personally, we're going to keep them personally. And then we just pay ourselves an income from our businesses to supplement whatever other income that we need. So that way we're able to control the taxable, the taxable income that we have.
Why cap at 5? Did you know it's you're going to be a full-time real estate investor?
Yeah, because we don't want to be. No, neither of us want to be a full-time real estate investor. We've made that decision, right? And that's been, kind of pondering for a while. And again, I don't want to speak too much on Richard's behalf, but it sounds to me like he likes the idea of having a business, being a business owner and actually having an occupation. Like I think there's something to that. Like when you can go out and earn an income and do a job, you get this kind of immediate feedback loop, like say, like you just do a job for somebody, you invoice them, they're happy, you get paid. Like there's something to that where you feel a direct, what's the word I'm looking for?
Job satisfaction.
Yeah. You just feel like a satisfaction, like you're actually involved in a community of people, right? I think sometimes we lose sight of that. You think back to an old fashioned village, you had the baker, you had the mechanic, you had, everybody had their job. and they all exchange goods and services with each other. And if you can go back to even a small, like a different version of that, you just have a more fulfilling life. And I think, you know, I
Is
think
Thunder Bay
that's
that
what it's all
tiny?
about, is having a fulfilling life. What were you saying?
Is Thunder Bay that tiny where you can have that kind of a small community where you each
No,
have
but
that
even
one
then,
role?
like I'm a financial planner, so I do financial planning for people. I go and buy my coffee beans from our local coffee roaster. I come in and say hello, and then I go in and purchase, a nice coffee from our coffee shop nearby, and I go and get my lunch from the lunch person across the street. I know the owner. Like
Right.
I'm
We're
really
very
all about
local.
that,
Yeah.
and it just feels you just feel a connection to your community when you just interact with people like that,
Right.
right? Like I'm involved on our neighborhood association board, and so there's a lot of
Mm-hmm.
just being in contact with small business owners that have all kinds of businesses. And yeah, I think once you disconnect yourself from that and you're no longer, you're just sitting at home collecting
Mm-hmm.
dividends or collecting rental income, like you'll notice a lot of people that have quote unquote retired early or reached some kind of financial level, they paused for a while or maybe played video games for a year and, started picking up maybe I don't know, drinking or drug habit or something. And then, and then they pause and then they go, wait, is there something more to life? And then they go and they start a business. They all do. They all start a
Mm-hmm.
business because they realize that starting a business, you can still have some control over your time, at least in the long run.
Mm-hmm.
And you have more control over what you do and what you focus your attention on. And even though financially they don't need to, yeah, that's, we all need some kind of belonging, like some kind of role that we play.
Right. Right. The Japanese call it ikigai. It's a
Oh,
Oh yeah, there's actually a word for it.
cool.
It's a neat word. It's just ikigai. Like it's so memorable because it's such a funny sounding word. Like
Yeah.
Tim Ferriss talks about it as well. But yeah, the Japanese believe that you need to have something to keep you going. You need, and then my dad's a doctor. He even tells his patients never retire completely
Mhm.
because you still need the mental stimulus to keep yourself going. He's
Oh,
seen it too
totally.
often where people just like the brain just shuts down when it's no longer challenged. It doesn't. You don't
Exactly.
necessarily have to have a business. You can have a grandkid, great grandkid. People have puppies, whatever. Choose whatever it is you do. But I'll probably always be in some sort of investment something,
Yeah.
right? Because
And
I
again,
enjoy
like it
doing it.
doesn't have to be a paying gig, right? I think that's usually what we
Yeah,
think of as an
mentorship.
occupation, but
Yeah,
you could be a full-time volunteer if that's your thing.
yeah,
And,
yeah.
that's still a way to get that fulfillment. It doesn't have to pay you
hmm
money.
I don't know. Full time dividend collector sounds like a good gig. So Dominique, like you've met many beginner investors, and in all worlds, both probably in your local community and also in like the real estate investor community. Like my
Yeah,
word,
in
you
our
must have
local
you
community, a
drove
bit less
far.
so. I only know maybe two or three real estate people in our city, but
um, I don't know. I don't know how else to ask this, but what kind of financial advice do you give the beginner real estate investor?
uh honestly, my main piece of advice is to know why you're doing it.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I think I mentioned this to you before, like, we've all heard of this 7 levels of why exercise that you do,
I don't know if we've all heard it. Please explain.
yeah, okay. Yeah. So you ask yourself, why am I doing this, right? Why do I want to build a real estate portfolio, for
Yeah.
example? And then your immediate top of the mind answer might be to have financial freedom or something
Mm-hmm.
like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second layer is, why do I want financial freedom? And then you answer that. And then you kind of keep going deeper and deeper. And this is supposed to give you like this
Right.
amazing, blow your mind kind of
All
answer
right.
as to why you're doing all this.
Can you share yours as an
Um,
example? Do you
Honestly,
want
no, because
financial
I've done the
freedom?
exercise a couple of times and it didn't really compute for me.
Uh-huh,
And I
uh-huh.
realized that the reason why was because I wasn't really trying to build a real estate portfolio. Like my husband was trying to build a real estate portfolio and I was participating in that,
Yeah, yeah,
but
yeah.
I never sat there with stars in my eyes and go, I want to build a real estate portfolio. So it didn't
Right,
really work
right.
for me. But I think that I've seen some people's answers is like, I want to start a foundation and I want to change the world and I want to bring wealth to other countries and these kind of really crazy, amazing sounding answers. And I'm like, but is that really what you're doing? You know, is that realistically what you're building or why are you doing that? I think the reason why most people start is because they want to be a little wealthier, right? You're kind of looking at your status quo and you're like, okay, keep working my job and keep putting a little bit of money away, and I'm kind of stalled. Well, you want to be a step above wealthier. That's what most people want at the end of the day. And what does that mean? Well, that might mean taking some time back, right? And then what they end up doing is spending double the time working to build this real estate portfolio. They would work their 40 hours a week job and then work 25 hours a week to build this thing, and miss the whole time of their kids growing up. And it's like, well, I don't think you had your why exercise really thought through, right? Like, do you want time with your kids, or do you want to be worth 20 million when you die? Pick one, right? And then they tend to gravitate to be worth 20 million by the time I die, and then miss a lot of that time.
Right.
I think,
which is what I preach to my clients is, real estate as a side hustle is very rewarding financially. It doesn't have to be a full-time gig. I can't imagine people giving the career advice like quit your job that you make six figures for, that you trained your entire life for, and that you are in your highest and best purpose. Quit your job, go be a full-time real estate investor, be a full-time landlord.
Or take somebody, for example, that makes, I don't know, 150 grand in their job, but their job is extremely stressful, right? So there's a lot of people in that boat, right? They make 150 grand, they get that that's a good income, but their job is like, their boss is terrible, the job itself is terrible, their customers are terrible, and they're like, I need to get out. And the ticket, we're told, is like, retire with real estate. So go from this job making 150 grand to owning a bunch of real estate properties. And then you start that, and then you realize
properties won't cash flow.
And then you realize I can't make remotely that amount on cash flow. And then it's like, well, then become a property manager, or then become some other service, be a realtor. And it's like, okay, but that's not at all, being a realtor is not at all connected to owning a couple duplexes. It's two completely different things. Now you're talking about risk, a sales professional, which can be great, but
you're a
that's
CFP.
That's not what you were told originally.
How safe is a realtor's income?
I mean, it's just similar to any commission, right? You could argue as a realtor, we're always going to need houses, right? Similar to the argument about real estate being safe, but
until AI replaces us.
Anyway, so this person making 150 grand, plan A could be retire with real estate, which we argued might be, not the best solution. What about option B is finding a better job that's more fulfilling, less stressful, and that might pay you, I don't know, 120, and then you make up the difference by investing in an asset. Like, what about, like, I've got so many friends and people I know that changed jobs during COVID for jobs that pay them less, and they're so much happier. They have more time, they sleep better, and just by having good financial habits, they were able to maintain a similar lifestyle and just be happier.
It's only one Lambo instead of two.
Right. Yeah, no. More the example of going from 150 to an amount less than that, And I think that nobody talks about that because it doesn't sound very sexy, It's kind of like, oh, take a less paying job. It doesn't have to be paying less, but what about like open up your other options, whether they pay the same or they pay less, or hey, maybe that new job will pay more. That's obviously a win-win. But you don't have to, like, leaving a job you don't like doesn't mean leaving having a job altogether. There's a lot of fulfilling jobs. There's a lot of people I know that love what they do. And if you can't find a job you like, maybe being a business owner is your thing, right? If you're a harshly independent person, or you're a very, you're like a type A kind of person, you're self-driven, being a business owner can be awesome. And that's something that I did that I never thought I would do if you asked me 10 years ago, because I didn't know a single business owner. No, my parents were teachers. So most of my parents' friends were also teachers or some kind of administrative workers. And I didn't really know business owners. I didn't really know what it was. I thought it was just kind of this separate class of people that I didn't understand. And so it's never computed to be a business owner. That's not on your career map when you're in grade 11 careers class,
Now you mentioned you do wear a hat for a financial planner. For those who don't know, actually, I think there's some people that still don't know. How does a financial planner make an income? How do they make their money?
Yeah. So if you walk
before you answer, there's one thing I find people who get I find that all these novice investors who have hired coaches who are like, they pay like $10,000 for them, they don't ask enough questions. Why not ask? I don't care, anyone, any service provider you're hiring. I don't think I think it's a fair question. How do you make money in this? Right? How does a financial planner make money in this? Like for example, there's a Globe Mail article. Rob Carrick. He's pretty. I like his stuff. Like his,
Yeah.
is he okay?
Yeah, he's all right.
He shared a link to a Google document with a list of like financial planners.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure if everyone knows. Well, there's like a wide variety of financial planners, but for example, the one in the list he provided, they were fee based.
Yeah.
And I think often it started at $5,000 for a financial plan.
Yeah.
But I'm lucky enough to have contacts from Cherry that I know it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
To tell someone what to do financially.
Yeah.
Is that be accurate? Is that your experience?
Yeah. So I mean, most of those they're called fee only. Fee based is actually a totally different thing. But again, that's only something you would know internally in our world. But fee only is like a flat fee, right? Like here's your fee. I'm going to give you a financial plan and basically like a roadmap to follow. So that is something that usually only CFPs do, certified financial planners. And that's something that I kind of do like off the record. Like I'm able to do that. But I tend to.
Do we have to delete that from the podcast?
No, it's not off the record. It's approved. I mean, it's not on my website. Like if you go on my website, it doesn't say Dominique does straight up fee financial plans.
Right.
I just kind of offer it to people as it comes up. But a lot of financial planners.
Can you explain why you don't advertise it?
That's a good question. So one of the main ways I make money is by managing investments. So say, Erwin, you had 500 grand and you wanted it managed by a financial planner. So I could manage your money and then I get paid like a 1% per year fee minus a bunch of fees that I paid, my overhead. And so that's the way that I get paid for that. It's an ongoing fee. And for that kind of client, I do the full financial plan, right? We do a financial plan, we monitor it. We, stay connected throughout the year onwards as their life changes. So for those clients, I'm already doing a financial plan. And by putting both on my website, it's confused a few people. They're like, oh, like, do I need to pay you to do financial planning? No. Like by having your investments with us, you get that already.
Right.
So instead of having huge paragraphs on my website explaining it, I'm keeping it simplified for now. Maybe I'll
and
add
also
a few.
The bank generally follows that same model. So I find
Exactly.
And they're
so it's a similar model as the bank, just that we don't only have funds from the banks, right? Like if I was RBC, I would just sell RBC funds. Like we've got, Fidelity is one of the main companies we work with. I think most people know what Fidelity is, and so we're an independent investment broker at the end of the day. But yeah, that's the main way that I work with people. And what's nice about it is it's kind of like having a lawyer on retainer, right? Like you have your financial planner. If somebody's got their money with me, I'm with them either until they leave or until I retire. And as I mentioned, I'm not retiring until I'm 65, so I'll be here for a while.
Which is like what, 45 years from now?
45 years. Well, you're giving me. I'm not 20 years old. I'm 29 years old right now. So yeah, it's ways away.
But still a baby.
I'm not counting the years. Let's just put it that way. But yeah. I think as a business owner, at the end of the day, you can just kind of hold on to the main parts of your business that you should be doing. And then why would you retire at that point?
How many real estate investors do you think have a financial planner?
Not that many. And I'll tell you a couple reasons for that. What I've noticed, and from myself also, like I've had some people that are real estate investors come up to me to see, if we could work together. And I have to say it's a little bit awkward on both ends, right? So a lot of times I notice that real estate investors, I'm trying to find a way to say this very nicely, they tend to be very, I don't know, I notice they're very cost cautious, except for when it comes to hire a coach, like like they'll watch every expense very carefully and ask a lot of questions about whether they should really be spending that money.
Right.
But if a coach,
so anyone listening that wants to be a property manager, you should hear this.
Yeah. So I've noticed that, I've tried to, for example, making a financial plan, right? If you've got some real estate holdings and other personal assets and you're like, I want to know if I want to retire. That's a common thing, right? I want to know if I can retire. Going to a financial planner for that is perfect, right? But what I noticed is that there's a bit of a disconnect between how a financial planner would calculate your ability to retire with your real estate versus what the client or the person with the properties would think. Like they might have a bit of the wrong idea of what their cash flow is, and then you kind of have to explain it to them. It's like it gets very granular.
Mm-hmm.
And I've just noticed a bit of a disconnect. I don't know how else to explain that.
You don't know how many times I've talked to people about like we were talking before we were recording, for example. One way to be able to retire in real estate is actually sell some of your assets when you're ready to, when you
Which
stop
if you use
working.
a financial planning software, that's one of the things that you can actually put in, right? So I could put in 2037 selling duplex B and estimating it went up by 2% a year. So you can have all that math in there, which is nice. That's really hard to calculate manually.
But I have these novices. It's like they're trying to help. Obviously, they're trying to help. But again, they're novices though, and they just tell me, "Why don't I just keep refinancing it?"
Yeah, that's assuming that it's forever going to go up, and forever that interest rates are 1.7% a year, and
that doesn't happen.
No, and again,
you're blowing up my financial plan, Dominique.
Well, that's another thing, right? Is that we know that you can take a loan against an asset and live off of that, and mathematically, yeah, you can do that, right? But in real life, what happens is people don't actually want to live off of loans, like
especially if I'm paying 7% on it.
Yeah, like that the math checks out. You can do that, but people behaviorally, and that's another financial planning concept. Like they don't want to borrow against their assets and live off of that. Like in your mind, you'd be like, this feels wrong. I know I'm paying interest. I don't like the feeling of this. So people don't actually end up doing that in real life. And that's actually another concept that ties into, that strategy with whole life policies, right?
Okay.
I know you've heard about, you build up this whole life policy and you can borrow against it. And it's a super nice thing. Yes, but most people are reluctant at the end of the day to go and borrow against their whole life policies. And I've seen it. We manage policies like people that bought them 10, 20 years ago, that put 10, 20 grand a year into them. Like I do hold a few of those policies. And, it's now they're in retirement age. And, we mentioned like, hey, you have this cash value you can borrow against if need be. And now, all of a sudden they kind of forgot that initial conversation from 20 years ago. And they're like, wait, borrow? I got to pay interest? It's like, yeah, you were told about this, not with me, but with someone else. Some other advisor that's now long gone, and they're hesitant, right? They're reluctant. They're like, well, I'd rather not take out a loan. And I'm like, well, it's not a loan. It's a policy loan. It's not the same as having a loan with the bank. It's a loan against your own assets. People, when you see the math, you see that it checks out. But when it comes to like day-to-day behavior, they're reluctant, right? People don't like having loans. They don't like to. So it's a very advanced concept at the end of the day that only like an advanced investor would be super comfortable doing.
Right. Because the alternative is I sell and I have a massive tax bill.
Right. Or the alternative is to live off your other assets and consider that policy to be what you leave behind at the end of the day, right? Which actually a lot of people do. I think we've got a lot of people that have whole life policies for 200, 300, 400 grand, and they're never going to need the cash value from it realistically, right? They're doing well. They've got businesses. They've got other assets. Unless they live to like 110, they're never going to have to dip into it.
Yeah, the whole financial education, everything, especially, I always see people ranting about it on Facebook. They don't teach this in schools. I really like the way that, I think it was actually, you mentioned the psychology of money. Like the 401k, for example, is not that old because previously people didn't have money to save. So you didn't need a savings plan.
Or everybody had unions and they had like pension plans through their work that were completely sufficient to take care of their needs.
And then, for example, I had two gentlemen that are starting a REIT, and they were telling me how the exact market dealer is it's only like 15 years old because Canadians have never been this rich.
Yeah,
that's partly. And like when you're telling me about this mindset that people have, like they have trouble borrowing against their whole life policy, even though it checks out. Like that's just because they're doing it for the first time.
Yeah,
But it's
And
nice to have,
again, like I think they don't have to either, right? Like a lot of people should take, if you're an adult, you know, you're in your 30s, 40s, whatever, and you still have room in your TFSA for
right, right,
investing, you still have
right.
room in your RSPs if it makes sense for you to use them. Just maxing out both of those can put you in a really good financial position, right? If you
Mhm.
max out your TFSA and your RSP and you've got a rental or two and you otherwise have a good income and like a reliable job that your skill set's always going to be needed,
Mhm.
you're already in the 1%, right? And I think people don't realize that, like how well off you are once you tick some of those boxes. And I think I'm in a unique position because I see people's finances all the time, right? Like that's my job. So when someone comes to me and goes like, am I doing okay? And they've got, you know, only quote unquote 3 rental properties and a really good job and a half paid down house. And I'm like, yeah, you're actually doing great. And sometimes they don't get to hear it because they only see themselves. They only compare themselves today to where they would like to be, which they would like to have $3 more million and a Lamborghini, and they don't.
Mm-hmm.
And that grounding that you can get by talking to a professional, I think, goes a long way. And that's what I get. You know, I don't have a financial planner of my own, but I have an accountant. That's part of what I wanted is I wanted to have other professionals, right? That could be like a third party, but grow along and see how, you know, how I'm growing in my business and be able to advise. Like sometimes you just want to ask someone like, do you think I'm doing all right? Do you have
Yeah, yeah,
any
yeah.
things you think I should do slightly differently? There's
Right,
a huge value in that. And
right.
yeah, like, you know, you mentioned people hiring coaches, but rarely financial planners. If you just had a financial planner's perspective, even I know like, you know, you mentioned a financial plan, a full engagement, sometimes like $5,000. A lot of financial planners do smaller engagements, you know, where it might be $500 for like a detailed consultation or $1,000 for like a simpler one
Right,
page
right.
sheet of recommendations.
But that
There's other
they're probably simpler as well, like versus
correct.
like someone like myself with I don't know what someone would charge me
Yeah,
because ours is so
exactly. So
complicated,
yeah, you and
right?
I probably have similar, you know, in terms of complexity. You guys
Yeah,
probably are a
multiple
bit more complicated than
corporations,
us. Yeah.
like
Yeah. So we only
businesses.
have 2 corporations and 4
Yeah.
rental properties, but I consider that to be compared to what I see, that's fairly complex,
Yes,
right?
exactly. Yeah, yeah,
And if I went to a financial planner other than myself, say, can you build us a financial plan?
yeah, yeah.
I wouldn't get a lot for $500. $500 would be like a consultation where we go through a few of my top of mind
Mm-hmm.
questions and
Mm-hmm.
where I might not get complete answers, right?
Right, right.
But even then, like I've paid a few one-time consultations for professionals in the past, and I got a lot of value from that. Like paying a CPA for an hour, like let me drill your brain with stuff that, you know, I want to get a second perspective on.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think there's a lot of value in that. Like I think we
Oh,
shouldn't
yeah,
limit ourselves to hiring like a business coach only and then slashing all the other professionals. Although I don't want to put all CFPs in one bucket, right? Personality fit is important. So if you walk into, I don't know, some random financial planner's office and the financial planner doesn't really get what you're doing with your real estate, like they've never seen it before, they don't really get it, maybe
yeah.
that's not the right person,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right? Because then they won't,
But
if
there's
they
not
don't know
many
what a
like you
BRRRR
though,
is, like that might not be the right person for you if you've owned multiple properties, because
right?
they might not really get what you're doing, right?
But there's not many that.
There's not really
Especially ones
what,
working
sorry?
at the bank. I can't imagine many
Well, the ones
working
at
at
the
the
bank
bank
don't charge
understand
a
real
flat
estate.
fee, right? You're not going to get a flat fee person at the banks. That's only independent firms. At the
Right.
bank, they're only going to do a financial plan for you if you have at least 250 grand in mutual funds with them, right? Which most real estate investors don't. If you happen to have that, then maybe
Mm-hmm.
maybe they'll do a financial plan for you, but I kind of doubt that they're going to incorporate all your rental properties into the mix.
Right, right.
Um, it might be a little above and beyond.
What is your opinion on like mutual funds and ETFs?
I think, again, like as I mentioned before, I don't think it should be compared to real estate at all because it's not at all the same thing. But I think honestly, it's a safe, steady investment that isn't leveraged. If you have it in a TFSA, all the money you make is tax free. That counts for something. And I think people should more closely, like if you took your real estate holdings and, you know, did an actual rate of return calculation and compared it to a good mutual fund over a 5-10 year period, it's not completely off base. I think if you look at your mom or your grandmother's mutual funds in a conservative portfolio, yeah, the returns might be a little underwhelming, but she's not going for high returns. So you can't compare your grandma's mutual fund to this really high risk strategy that you're taking on. What makes real estate higher in returns when it's done correctly and in an upwards market is the leverage part, right? And that's also what makes it risky. If we just bought properties in cash and then just held on to them in a 50-year period, if the market wasn't this crazy in Toronto, for example, we would make moderate returns. And then you back out all the fees from selling, and it'd be kind of like buying gold. If it wasn't for the leverage, you would just be buying it and holding it and eventually selling it.
You said the word.
You said the G word.
Because, well, not all financial planners like real estate. Let's talk about gold.
Well, and again, the financial planners, depends how they get paid, right? Like if they're fee only and they charge you a flat rate, they might not hate real estate. Like if you just own an apartment building and you tell them, I own this apartment building, they might be like, cool, good for you. That's a pretty safe asset class. But if you're flipping and you're like aggressively doing these hardcore renovations, they might have an aversion to it because it feels risky, right? And financial planners tend to be a bit more risk averse, and they're not enthused, they're not excited for you that you're taking on a lot of risk in a shaky market. Like they're not going to be excited with you in the same way. So sometimes I think real estate investors look at that and they get kind of bummed out. They're kind of like, oh, this person's super lame. It's like when you have a lawyer that all they have all the time to say to you is like, well, I don't know. Well, I don't think so. I don't think you should do that. You can find a lawyer that's not like that. There are some that are a bit more balanced where like, they'll kind of level off with you, but they're not always going to be giving you bad news. Same for a financial planner.
What's your thoughts on gold and silver and Bitcoin?
Well, I don't know. I'm not going to speak on Bitcoin because again, speculation, but like gold, silver, I mean, if I had many millions of equity and I was like looking to diversify in another way, maybe I'd get a bit of gold. I don't know. It's a wealth preservation strategy, right? And I think people hype it up as being this anti-government thing nowadays, like don't trust the government, don't trust the stock market, buy gold. And okay, but again, it's not going to be a wealth builder. It's just a wealth preservation strategy. It could be like your safe thing that you keep aside that if something crazy happened, you could always trade it in for money, I guess. I don't think much of it. I just think it's too hyped up as being this, anti-government alternative nowadays. And
how do you advise your clients on handling inflation?
I think I mostly advise people honestly on just making sure they have a skill to offer the marketplace. Like if you're a business owner, just focus on growing your business as much as you can so that your revenue keeps up with inflation. If you're a sales professional, get better at sales. If you are, otherwise climbing up the corporate ladder, just make sure you know your value and that you're negotiating your salary. I think that's the biggest thing people can do. And so you kind of have to know, like, look at yourself, look at your family situation and go, okay, what's the best use of our time? Is it to increase our income or is it to cut our expenses? And for some people, cutting the expenses is the best place they can allocate energy. But for most people, it's increasing income. Or for some people, it's both, right? So you take an example of a stay-at-home mom, right? Like she's home, she's not earning an income. The thought of starting a side business while caring for a 3-month-old is maybe not super great, right? So this person might be best served by watching their expenses and just cutting things like takeout, right? You can save a lot by just cutting those extras that we've gotten used to, right? All those quick, convenient services.
Disney Plus.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you, Christian Freeland.
Yeah, never mind that, but just cutting like a skip the dishes purchase once a month is way more,
I've been opposed to. I've never bought at Starbucks.
So I think even just looking at your family unit, so in us, it's like me and Richard, right? We look at, okay, as a family, right? As a family, you almost look at your family as a business. I know it sounds kind of, I don't know. That's how I look at everything. So so you list out like what are our skills, right? What are our income sources? What are our core expenses? What can we do about them? So for us, like one of our largest expenses is our mortgage on our new house. And because we have a lovely variable 6% mortgage, fantastic. So one thing we can do about that is to use some of our rental income to offset our cost of our mortgage, which is great. But otherwise, we're just focused on having better businesses, right? Like getting better at getting leads and getting better at sales and at doing valuable work that people find valuable so that they're happy to pay for it. I think if more people focused in those areas, even people with a job, right? Like if you're employed somewhere and you have a regular T4 job, and you want to make more money, instead of just waiting every year to see if you're going to get a raise, maybe be more proactive about it, right? Like try and put yourself in your boss's shoes. Like what would be more valuable that I could be doing? And it doesn't have to be working overtime. It could just be like doing different things in your job, doing things a little deeper, or just asking your boss, like, what would be more helpful to you that I could be doing to go up in my career, right? I think those are things that people have just kind of been comfortably just doing their job for a while, and maybe it's time to be a bit more assertive.
And for the full-time real estate investor, get better at raising capital.
Yeah. And I think we could have a whole other conversation around, the security around, lending out money or using lent money.
Oh yeah, you didn't mention your properties are all just your own? Like even though you went through those the group that you were part of, that you attended, like they were all about OPM.
Yeah, and we just never we've thought about like should we have a joint venture, but for us it would have just been like there wasn't a huge advantage because we had some of our own capital, whether it was cash or like very low interest secured line of credits. Like we have capital, we have the skill set, we're in the location. So there wasn't like a missing gap. Like we didn't need someone's capital that bad. Like we were able to qualify for mortgages. So I think if there was like a big gap in something, whether we couldn't qualify for mortgages or we had no money, maybe that could have been something that would have made sense. But I'm kind of glad we didn't do it, because then when you don't have a business partner, you don't have to go and like crawl back to them when things aren't going well or when the interest rates went up. I feel like having to present like a quarterly report of your financials to your JV partners, like that makes it a business, and that's not passive by any means, and it just adds more weight. Like if I'm going to lose money, I'd rather just me lose the money and not have to crawl back to somebody else to say that they lost money too.
Even though quarterly reporting would be pretty easy for you?
Sorry?
Quarterly reporting would be pretty easy for you to do what I call like investor relations, like keeping your
I guess, but then so either it would take up more of my time or I would be paying my accountant more to actually have a quarterly report ready for us. So I think that's another phantom cost, right? Another cost that nobody can
you have to pay your accountant. That's a real cost.
Yeah, and not just to do your tax return, but to maintain your books throughout the year. And if you're going to have to do reporting for JV partners, you need quarterly, like completely done up financials. And there's a cost to that. Like we happily pay, several thousand for our bookkeeping and accounting every year. And I'm glad to do it. But I think a lot of people don't realize the costs that goes with that. Like my business is super complicated. Like we get income from all kinds of all kinds of insurance and investment companies, right? And it all has to be reconciled. And there's a lot to that. And we've got payroll and, business loans, that kind of stuff.
Really difficult question.
Oh.
Asset allocation.
Okay.
You mentioned many different categories of investments: mutual funds, gold, silver, whole life, owning real estate outright. We haven't even talked about passive real estate, like either private equity or like REITs. How should one split it up?
I think I think for most people, it's easy to kind of look at it as a pie chart. You look at a big circle.
I literally have that picture in my head.
Yeah. So you could draw it out on a piece of paper, and then for, anybody listening to this, I guess, just draw it out and then draw in the circle. Like, what do your assets look like right now, right? For most people, it's probably equity in their rentals. And then a separate part of the pie chart is like equity in your home, like your principal residence. And another part of the pie chart, if you're a business owner like myself, is like the actual value on paper of your business, what it would sell for. And then another part of that would be whether you've got a pension through your work, looking at the actual value of that pension, I think is important.
Do many people even know how to value a pension?
I've look at your pension statement. You don't have to do a crazy formula. Like it says on your pension statement somewhere down there, like if you were to transfer this out, it would be 542,000. Like there's an amount on. Well, depends on the pension, Erwin. Okay. Depends. But that would be part of your asset allocation, right? Or if you've got RSPs, it'd be part of that too. So I think for most people, just knowing where they're at right now is helpful. And then you have to ask yourself, maybe involving a financial planner would be a good idea too, but just looking at yourself, like, are you comfortable with this allocation? Like, does it make you uncomfortable that 80% of your wealth is in real estate? Some people might say, that makes me comfortable because real estate is safe. Okay, fair enough. As long as there's many different types of real estate, or maybe you're spread in different sectors. Like if all my real estate, for example, was in a very small town with no economy, or that was relying on one economy, I'd be pretty spooked, right? I'd be like, well, all it takes is for that one industry to leave or to close down, and then my properties actually go down in value tremendously because nobody wants to live there. So that would be something to be concerned about, is the different types of real estate, the location, the concentration. Are you buying all these properties on the same street? What if that street ends up being the crappy part of town eventually, right? And then looking at those other asset categories is like, if you have RSPs, and they're in mutual funds, for example, and you're not super impressed by them, maybe actually make an effort to see if there's better mutual funds out there. I think people just assume they're all the same, or that they're all bad. And then sometimes people bring me their mutual funds and I'm like, you're in some conservative portfolio. Like, of course you're not impressed by its growth. And I could tell that you're more comfortable with risk than someone in a conservative that would normally be in a conservative portfolio. So let's change that. And that could be a huge shift. But for me, like right now, our main wealth is in real estate because we agreed to start with that right away because you can take advantage of the leverage. But I'm planning, like as soon as we sell our first property, I think we're planning on selling one of our properties in 3 years. And when it renews, when our 1.7% mortgage renews. And I told Richard, like what I want to do is I want to sell and take all the proceeds and put them in our TFSAs and mass them out. That's my goal. Like I want to start having that more like genuinely passive source. I want to use up that TFSA room because it's going to be over $100,000 each by then. And, then you have 200,000 that is earning money completely tax-free. Like all the money you make is tax-free. So if you make, say, 8% a year on average, that's what, 16 grand a year tax-free. So you can either take it out and use it, or you can let it grow. And isn't that amazing? Like that's no work. And if you have a property that cash flows 16 grand, like you have to do a lot of work for that.
Yeah, 8% cash on cash return. Yes, please. Where?
Yeah, I mean, we kind of have that here, to be honest. But it's a lot of work and there's a lot of risk. And as soon as a tenant leaves, now you're spending a month working to fill that vacancy. Like that's work. I've seen Richard work to fill a vacancy. Like he's on the phone like for weeks, and then he drives there to meet with somebody, and then it's a dud, or they don't show up, or they were looking for something different. Then he drives back. You forget how much time you're spending. So I'm looking forward to changing our asset allocation a little bit to having that truly passive piece as a part of our overall portfolio. Like we're still always going to have those active properties, but I don't want to have 25 of them. Like I don't aspire to that at all. I don't. I don't see the appeal. And thankfully, it looks like Richard's on the same page as me. So I think that's a big part of it, is agreeing with your spouse on your investment strategy.
You cut him off from financing, he's cut off.
Yeah.
What would you be putting your 100K TFSA into? Say it's today.
I would be, well, honestly, I mean, it's in 3 years. I haven't fully drawn that out, but honestly, probably just some kind of growth funds. Like I'd have it spread between a couple of different funds. Like usually we build like 4 or 5 fund portfolios that are complementing each other. And then that way, if you need money from it and you're in a market downturn, not all 5 funds are going to react at the same time, right? Some will be up, some will be down. So for example, like a Canadian value fund would have been up during all of COVID, like weirdly keeps going up, versus a global growth fund was doing the opposite during that same time period. So if you're invested in a couple different funds, they're all, kind of hovering at different rates. And so you can access capital without taking a loss. Yeah. So
you would buy the fund though? You'd never try to just own individual stocks that would mimic?
I don't have interest in that because I honestly, like, part of what I do, I'm so big picture and everything that I don't have an interest in individual securities. Like I don't. And that's why I stick at the mutual fund level, because I like the idea that there's these portfolio managers that like all day, all they do is trade stocks, right? They research the stocks, they buy them, they sell them. And I just don't have an interest in that. Like I opened up a self-directed TFSA for myself at some point. I bought a couple of stocks, but I realized like I'm really uninterested in it. And I don't want the human emotion aspect to kick in when it's my money. I almost want to be removed from that and have someone just making rational decisions in the background.
Fascinating. That's pretty cool. I really like the idea that you're doing five different funds. So they move differently. That way, you're never caught in any market.
That's and not cool. Never say never, right? But
yeah,
you would think that they're not all down at the same time. Yeah, normally.
I'm trying to think of a scenario where that happens. Basically, a meteorite hit Earth.
Yeah, I mean, last year was a really weird year for like more conservative investments, because the interest rates went up so sharply that the bonds got all devalued. So people that were invested very conservatively last year were like totally let down by the returns, right? Like people that thought they were in the safest investments in the world might have been down like 5 or 8%, and they were like, "Holy man!" Like it was the first time it happened in 100 years. That was very, very interesting. But going forward, those safer investments should do really well because, again, like the interest rates are up, right? So the interest rates that you make on a bond are higher, and that's great.
Fabulous. Dominique, this has been very enlightening for me. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Where can people follow along your journey?
So I'm mostly on Facebook. So I've got my personal profile if people want to connect personally. But please, if you post a lot about coaching and stuff, I might unfollow you. Don't take offense to that. And then I've got my business page as well on Facebook or my website. And then I post on Instagram too. So just under my name, Dominique Chenard.
Fabulous. And for listeners' benefit, I'll have it all posted in the show notes.
Oh, and on LinkedIn, I post a lot of like business stuff on LinkedIn. So for the entrepreneur types or real estate people.
Any final words for the listener, especially someone who's newer or someone who's in a tough spot? Dominique, just listening to you, like
those are two different people.
I know, but Dominique, just as observation, because you've been like I can even observe your own journey. Like you've been to like the raw events, right? And to hear where you are now, it's very different, and that's totally cool. I think every investor has to go on their journey. A lot of them have to experience them themselves.
Yeah.
And there's no right or wrong for anyone. I do think it's wrong to lose money, though.
Yes. Yeah.
Any final words you want to share?
Honestly, like I think, when are you publishing this episode? Just based on timing, is it after or before the tax deadline?
It'll be after tax deadline.
After the tax deadline. Okay. Well, if your accounting stuff was a mess last year and you know that you should do better, just bite the bullet, get an accountant. And if their fees are higher than you thought, that's probably a good thing. It means they're actually going to take time with you. So I think people should go and invest with an accountant. If your great aunt does your bookkeeping, that's great, but you also need an accountant to bring it all together. So I think if more people invested in working with an accountant, the world would be a better place. And it's not really a shameless plug at all. Like I don't really work with real estate investors that much. Like if they have 1 or 2 properties, sure. But as soon as it gets to like corporate stuff or having multiple holdings, I recommend going to an actual accounting firm.
I might know of one.
You might know of one. I hear that your wife does accounting stuff. So yeah.
And then on the investment side?
That's my final word, honestly, is just
I need a final word on the investment side.
Invest in professionals, not just coaches, you know.
Fabulous. Dominique, thanks so much for doing this.
All right. And yeah, nice being on this podcast.
Thank you for watching. If you want to learn how to invest in real estate from scratch, my team teaches beginners how to use the #1 investment strategy that I personally use in a virtual free training class every month. Go to investortraining.ca/YouTube to register for our next class. The link is also in the description as well. I publish at least 2 to 3 videos a week here, so subscribe if you want to keep learning from seasoned investors like myself and my guests. And if you're just starting out, feel free to ask questions and comment below, and I do the best to answer each of those comments and questions myself. Again, if you're ready to learn the nitty-gritty about real estate investing from a professional investor, register for our next virtual class. That's at investortraining.ca/YouTube. Thanks again for watching. See you in the next video.